Hi, welcome to Kevin Alone's audiobook reading Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Part 3.8. How a Tipping Point Tips. If I told you I knew of a company that invented an amazing new technology that will change the way we consume TV, that piqued your interest? Perhaps you'd be interested in buying their product or investing in their company. It gets better. They have the single best product available. Their quality is through the roof, way better than anything else on the market, and their PR efforts have so been remarkable. They've even become a household name. Interested? This is the case of TiVo, a company that seemed to have everything going for them, but turned out to be a commercial and financial failure. Since then, they have seemed to have a recipe for success. TiVo's flop defied conventional wisdom. Their struggles, however, are easily understood if you consider that they thought what they did mattered more than why. They also ignored the law of diffusion of innovation. In 2000, Malcolm Gladwell created his own tipping point when he shared with us how tipping points happen in business and in society. In his aptly named book, The Tipping Point, Gladwell identifies groups of necessary populations he calls connectors and influencers. With little doubt, Gladwell's ideas are spot on, but it still begs the question, why should an influencer tell anyone about you? Marketers are always trying to influence the influencers, but few really know how. We can't dispute that tipping points happen, and the conditions that Gladwell articulates are right, but can a tipping point happen intentionally? They can't just be an accidental phenomenon. If they exist, then we should be able to design one. If we can design one, we should be able to design one that lasts beyond the initial tip. It's the difference between a fad and an idea that changes an industry or society forever. In his 1962 book, Diffusion of Innovations, Everett M. Rogers was the first to formally describe how innovations spread through society. 30 years later, in his book, Crossing the Chasm, Geoffrey Moore expanded on Rogers' idea to apply the principle to high tech product marketing. But the law of diffusion of innovations explains much more than just spread of information or technology. It explains the spread of ideas. If you don't know how or the law, you're likely already familiar with some of its terminology. Our population is broken into five segments that fall across a bell curve: innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. As the law states, the first 2.5% of the population are the innovators, and the next 13.5% are early adopters. Innovators, Moore says, pursue new products or ideas aggressively and are intrigued by any fundamental advance. Being first is a central part of their lives. As their name suggests, innovators are the small percent of the population that challenges the rest of us to see. And I think of the world a little differently. Early adopters are similar to innovation in that they appreciate the advantages wrought by new ideas or technologies. They are early to recognize the value of new ideas and are quite willing to put up with imperfection because they can see the potential. Although quick to see the potential and willing to take risks to try new technologies or ideas, early adopters are not idea generators like the innovators, but both groups are similar, as Moore says, in that they really rely heavily on their intuition. They trust their gut. Early adopters, like innovators, but to a lesser degree, are willing to pay a premium or suffer some level of inconvenience to own a product or espouse an idea that feels right. Those on the left side of the diffusion curve are the ones who stood in line for 6 hours to be among the first to buy the iPhone. Apple's entry into the mobile phone market, even though they could have walked into a store a week later and bought one without waiting. Their willingness to suffer an inconvenience or pay a premium had less to do with how pay or great the product was and more to do with their own sense of who they are. They wanted to be the first. These are also the personality types who bought flat screen TVs when they first came out, even though they cost upwards of $40,000 and the technology was still far from perfect. My friend Nathan fits this profile. I walked around his house once and counted no fewer than 12 Bluetooth earpieces for his mobile phone lying around in his house. I asked him why he has so many. Did they all break? I queried. No, he replied. They came out with a new one. There were also about five laptops, various models of BlackBerry smartphones, and boxes of other gadgets lying about that never quite worked out well. Nathan is an early adopter. The next 34% of the population are the early majority, followed by the late majority, and finally the laggards on the far right side of the spectrum. Loggers are the ones who buy touch tone phones only because they don't make rotary phones anymore. The early and late majority are more practical minded. For them, rational factors matter more. The early majority is slightly more comfortable with new ideas or technologies, while the late majority is not. The farther right you go on the curve, the more you will encounter the clients and customers who may need what you have, but don't necessarily believe what you believe. As clients, they are the ones for whom, no matter how hard you work, it's never enough. Everything usually boils down to price with them. They are rarely loyal, they rarely give referrals, and sometimes you may even wonder out loud why you still do business with them. They just don't get it, our gut tells us. The importance of identifying this group is so that you can avoid doing business with them. Why invest good money and energy to go after people who, at the end of the day, will do business with you anyway if you meet their practical requirements, but will never be loyal if you don't? It's not too hard to recognize where people fall on the spectrum once you're in a relationship with them. The opportunity is to figure out which is which before you decide to work with them. We all sit at different places on the spectrum depending on the product or idea. Most of us are fiercely loyal to certain products and ideas at various times and demonstrate left side of the curve behavior. And for other products or ideas, we exhibit right side of the curve behavior. When we sit on one side of the spectrum, we often have a hard time understanding those on the other side because their behavior does not make sense to us. My sister is an early adopter when it comes to fashion trends, whereas I'm firmly in the late majority. It was only recently that I finally caved and bought a pair of overpriced designer blue jeans. I admit they look good, but I still think they're worth the money, and I can understand why my sister thinks they are. In contrast, I'm an early adopter for some technologies. I bought a Blu ray DVD player before they had perfected the technology. I paid about four or five times more for it compared to a regular DVD player. My sister can't understand why I waste my money on all that useless stuff. As she puts it, we will never see eye to eye on the stuff. Each of us assigns different values to different things, and our behaviors follow accordingly. This is one of the major reasons why it is nearly impossible to convince someone of the value of your product or ideas based on rational arguments and tangible benefits.